Hi everyone, it's Matt again. I wanted to make a video to show you how to navigate the encoder and give you a few tips that should save you some time when you're using it. The first thing, this is the home page that you're going to come to once everyone is able to log in. Hopefully that gets resolved today as well. If you click this help button here, it'll open a new tab with a ton of information, but what I'd like you to do is go to the other product resources, click CRS training, and go through these tutorials. You're not going to use all these functions in the encoder to get to what we need to, but having a good understanding is important. Most coders are using encoders, not the books anymore. The books are very important to learn coding, but you won't use them a lot going forward. So please check those out. The other thing I want to show you here is the references tab, and that's going to take you here. There are some really cool things. Just go through these. Whatever sounds interesting to you. The medical dictionary is very handy to have. You've got access to the Fay Brown Coding Handbook. So good stuff here that could help you out as well. Now, to get to an actual case, um, I wanted to go through an actual example. So if you'll bear with me here, you'll actually get a free answer to the quiz. So in this case, we have a 75-year-old patient who's admitted to the hospital for a 48-hour history of nausea and vomiting. Patient also has type 2 diabetes and is admitted for evaluation of her complaints. After workup and testing, the patient is discharged home in an improved condition. During our hospital stay, she requires subcutaneous insulin injections due to elevated blood sugar. And the final discharge diagnosis includes nausea and vomiting due to either food poisoning or gastroenteritis. This is actually an interesting case because generally, if a patient had food poisoning or gastroenteritis, and we knew what the cause was, nausea and vomiting would become a symptom that we wouldn't code. In this case, we don't have a definitive diagnosis, so nausea and vomiting actually becomes our principal diagnosis. So back to this, at our first screen, you can choose female or male and the age of the patient. Obviously, if we're dealing with a pregnancy complication, it would be important to make sure you have a female or something that would only affect children or the very old. You want to have the right age, but for most cases it's not going to matter. So you can enter this accurately, but if you want to save some time, I usually just go with 30 unless the condition requires a certain age. This next one, the disposition, this is important in the real world. For most of our cases, though, it's not going to matter. So I'm just going to quickly choose the home. And at this page, we've got the admit diagnosis. This is, again, important if we were billing and dealing with real patients, but for our case, we're not being asked for the admit diagnosis, so I'm just going to click continue. By doing this, I'm not going to have to enter a lot of things twice to get a, if your admit diagnosis and your principal diagnosis were different, so that can definitely save you some time. So our principal diagnosis, again, was nausea and vomiting, so I'm going to start there. Nausea with vomiting. Now this is telling me that this shouldn't be a principal diagnosis. And in most cases it wouldn't if we had a definitive diagnosis. But I'm going to click OK and say this is our principal diagnosis. So the encoder was trying to help us with that, but we have an interesting case here. So I'm going to add an additional diagnosis. I'm going to enter my gastroenteritis. I've been through these and kind of read through it, but it gives you a lot of options if you had something more specific. In our case, we don't, so I'm going to choose unspecified, and there we've got the code for that. I'm going to add an additional diagnosis, and this will be for our food poisoning. Food poisoning, and again, if we had more specific information, we could go there, but we have an unspecified cause. And then lastly, we've got our diabetes. Diabetes mellitus. Again, we don't have any other information not listed above. Not complicating pregnancy. If we had chosen male, this wouldn't pop up. Type 2. And this is, I find this interesting too about this question because generally, the patient received insulin while they were in the hospital, but we don't have enough information provided to us, as you won't with these examples, to know if it's poorly controlled or even though that would kind of indicate that it might be. So in this case, it's unspecified. We don't have any complications. and we don't know if the insulin use is long-term, so we stick with unspecified. You want to make sure you're not choosing things unless you know for sure. So in this case, we get brought to this kind of standard diabetes code that you would quickly have memorized if you were coding on a daily basis, for a career. Continue. Excuse me, and that's going to lay out our principal diagnosis and our secondary diagnosis. I can verify here that we match what the book says, 78701, 0059, 5589, and 25000. Now these two are not in the same order, but they're both really at the same level, so that's fine that they're not in the same order. Either way would be fine. The important thing is we've got our principal diagnosis correct there. So I hope that you found that helpful, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.